after the long and very tough yesterday afternoon session. We have to close now the item 7A of the agenda. However, we still have to go through the list of state of conservation not open for discussion for the Arab region. So I would like, in this regard, to give the floor to Mrs. Dodds. Mrs. Dodds, you have the floor, please.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Bonjour à tous. Les rapports sur l'état de conservation des sites de la région arabe inscrits sur la liste du patrimoine en péril qui n'ont pas été ouverts pour discussion sont les suivants. Le 37COM 7A 24, Assour en Irak. Le 37COM 7A 25, Samara en Irak. Le 37COM 7A 27, l'église de la Nativité à Bethléem, Palestine. Et le numéro 28, Zabid au Yémen. Merci, Monsieur le Président.
So, no objection, we adopt the decision. So the decision is adopted. So now we come to the agenda 8C. I invite Mr. Alessandro Passamo from the World Heritage Center to give us the updated list of World Heritage in danger, taking into account the decision taken during the examination of the State of Conservation report, as well as the nomination of property on the World Heritage list. The update of the list will be presented orally by Mr. Balsamo, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Let me briefly provide you with a customary outline of the decision taken by the committee concerning inscription on the World Heritage List and on the list of World Heritage in danger. The committee, at its 37th session, inscribed 19 new properties on the World Heritage List, 5 natural and 14 cultural, and approved the extension of 3 properties already inscribed on the list. Following the debates of item 8B, 5 properties were referred and 2 deferred. At this session, in 8 cases, the committee changed the advisory body recommendation, which was presented in the draft decision. 2 referrals became 2 inscriptions, 4 deferrals became referrals, 1 deferral became an approved extension, and 1 non-inscription became referral. In terms of the inscription, we are approaching the round figure of 1,000 properties on the list, which could be reached at the next session. The overall figure on the World Heritage List are now 981 properties, of which 759 are cultural, 193 natural, and 29 mixed. The breakdown of inscribed properties by region at this session is Africa 2 property, Arab region 1 property, Asia Pacific 8 properties, Europe North America 7 properties, and Latin America Caribbean 1 property. The state parties of Fiji, Lesotho, and Qatar had their first properties inscribed on the World Heritage List at this session. And the committee allocated approximately 22 hours of discussion to examine 30 nominations. This resulted in an average of 44 minutes of discussion for each nomination. As a result of the decision relating to the status conservation of properties inscribed on the list and the decision on nomination of properties to the World Heritage List, the committee decided to inscribe 7 properties on the list of World Heritage in danger. Solomon Islands, Istrano, ancient city of Damascus, ancient city of Bosra, site of Palmyra, and ancient city of Aleppo, Crac de Chevalier and Kalat Salah, and ancient villages of northern Syria by Syria. At the same time, one property was removed from the World Heritage List in danger, BAM and its cultural landscape in Iran. Accordingly to this decision, there are now 44 properties inscribed on the list of World Heritage in danger. Draft Decision 37-8C 1, 2, and 3 are on pages 1, 2, and 3 of both the English and French version of document 8C. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Balsamo, for this update. I now invite the State Party to adopt the draft decision 37-8C.1, 37-8C.2, and 37-8C.3. So I open for comment, please. Floor.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Je viens de lire ce projet de décision 37-8C.1 et je reviens au débat que nous avions eu au sujet de la mise en péril de tous les sites de la République de Syrie. J'ai été convaincue que tous les sites seraient inclus dans une même décision. Pour des raisons d'opérationnalité, j'avais posé cette question. Et on m'avait répondu que tous les sites seraient inclus dans une même décision. Ils sont effectivement inclus dans une même décision, mais ils sont listés un par un. Donc sur le plan de la forme, je propose la République syrienne, ancienne ville de Damas, de Bosra, le site de Palmyre, l'ancienne ville d'Alep, le Krak des Chevaliers et les villages antiques du Nord, et entre parenthèses, l'unique décision. C'est sur le plan de la forme que j'interviens. Merci, Monsieur le Président.
You have the floor to Mr. Balsamo.
On peut, je pense, mettre la décision dans ces formes-là. Je crois pas qu'il y a un problème. C'est au rapporteur après de faire cet ajustement.
Changer. More comment, please. We wait for the rapporteur a little bit.
Say that
Yes, we agree with the idea raised by His Excellency Ambassador Ashiri. Now, rapporteur is doing, you see, and we cannot show at the screen now, but we will show later on. In no more comment, we can proceed to the adoption of the decision. So I declare the decision. I already, I think, raised the number. I declare this decision adopted. Now we come to the minor modification to the boundary of property already inscribed on the World Heritage List. We can now proceed to the examination of minor modification to the boundary of property already inscribed on the World Heritage List. You will find all the related draft decision in document 8B.at. I am going to call again on IUCN and ICOMOS to be very concise in their presentation, as you will be allocated only 1 minute to present each minor modification. So I thank you in advance for your cooperation, please. You have the floor. IUCN. ICOMOS first, yeah, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. ICOMOS will begin and then pass to our colleagues. This proposed binder modification for this mixed site of the Tasmanian wilderness has been nominated under natural criteria only. No details are provided on cultural assets, and it is clear that the proposed new boundary has not been drawn with respect to cultural attributes. ICOMOS understands why there is a degree of urgency to approve this modification in order that the area will be protected. Nevertheless, it is unclear to ICOMOS why the project to develop this extension, on which a large amount of resources have been expended, has not taken account of cultural attributes, nor does it appear that there has been any consultation with Aboriginal communities. ICOMOS would like to note that the Tasmanian wilderness is with us today, as the area was saved from inundation by a dam just before inscription in 1989. The campaign to save it stressed its cultural value as well as its natural value. In the past 10 years, the committee has consistently stressed the need for the state party to consider cultural attributes in a more concerted way and to strengthen cultural heritage capacity. The file acknowledges cultural values require further study and consultation. In very useful discussions with the state party, ICOMOS has been made aware that between 80 to 100 sites are already registered, and that cultural sites, and that hundreds more have yet to be inventoried. It appears that this area along the rivers to the east of the property is particularly rich in cultural sites. Nonetheless, without a formal submission, ICOMOS cannot comment on the way cultural attributes might support outstanding universal value, nor on the protection and management of the cultural assets. Therefore, we recommend that this minor boundary modification is referred back to the state party in order that they may undertake further study and consultation with the Tasmanian Aboriginal community in order to provide detailed information on cultural value and how, of the area and how this relates to the outstanding universal value of the property, and to provide detailed information on the legal provisions for cultural heritage, as well as on the management arrangements of cultural heritage, particularly in relation to the control of access to archaeological sites and sites of cultural significance for the Aboriginal community. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. And just to briefly continue, IUCN's evaluation of this minor modification is in document infate B2 add, and this proposed modification includes areas along the northern and eastern boundary of the property, and it encompasses extensive stands of tall eucalyptus forest, associated rainforest, significant karst and glacial landforms, as well as alpine and subalpine environments. We note that the eastern boundary has been a source of constant concern since the extension of this property. It's been the subject of a number of committee decisions, and I can, without giving you the detail of the decisions, remind the committee it adopted the language of urges action in this regard at 31 COM. It reiterated its request at 32 COM, recommended action at 34 COM, and reiterated its recommendation at 36 COM. IUCN considered this proposal in relation to natural criteria, and including through taking advice from those people in the IUCN network who were involved in evaluating the extension at the time. We conclude that this would add to the integrity of the property as currently inscribed in relation to natural values. It would also facilitate improved protection and management in relation to the issues that I've mentioned previously. And so IUCN's recommendation in relation to the natural criteria would be that the committee would consider approval of this minor boundary modification, and the draft decision, Mr. Chair, is at page 7 of both the English and French versions of working document 8B add. Thank you.
Thank you, IUCN and ECOMOS. If there are objection, Senegal, please.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Avant de nous prononcer, j'aurais souhaité qu'on donne la parole à l'État parti afin qu'il nous édifie davantage sur les valeurs culturelles. Merci.
Please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We are dealing here with a minor boundary modification, and the article on the operational guidelines on this states a minor boundary modification is one that has not significant impact on the extent of the property, nor it affects its OUV. In no way this paragraph suggests that a minor boundary modification has to be evaluated in a way that it would do for a new nomination. And we believe that the role of a boundary modification is to ensure that OUV is safeguarded or even enhanced. And in the case in front of us, the State Party of Australia is doing something very interesting. The property is seeing threats from outside, and instead of going the way that we have observed in earlier cases, excising parts of the property, it takes the inverse approach. It's adding territory to the property with this, and this will add protection and mitigate threats. This is a very wise step and is to be commended. And the committee has been asking for this boundary modification for a long time. And considering what I've said before, Germany believes that the committee could and should approve this boundary modification today. And I think it's an urgent need for ensuring integrity of that property. Thanks.
I give the floor to Malaysia.
Thank you, Chair. Malaysia would like to recommend that we act on this opportunity to protect the remarkable natural and cultural values found in the proposed extension. And we have recommended minimal changes to the existing draft decision. Malaysia strongly supports the approval of this proposed extension. Thank you, Chair.
I give the floor to India, please.
Thank you, Chair. India also agrees with Germany and Malaysia and endorses the approval of this boundary. Thank you.
I give the floor to Serbia.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We would like to welcome the effort made by the State Party to find solution for this recommendation made by the World Heritage Committee in adopted decisions for several years, basically to address major threat to this property, logging. And State Party was working for several years to find solution, and we believe that solution is good, and the Tasmanian Forestry Agreement Act is adopted in 2013, and it could help basically that additional habitats important for the rare species will be included. So we strongly support the approval of the minor boundary modification. Thank you.
Je donne la parole à l'Algérie.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. L'Algérie appuie la Malaisie et l'Allemagne, notamment en ce qui concerne les commentaires faits sur la définition des modifications mineures, et propose que ce dossier soit accepté. Merci, Monsieur le Président.
I call on Estonia, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Estonia also strongly supports the planned extension. Thank you.
Yes, I'd like to ask if some member state, some member of the committee cannot support to speak first, because now we have a lot of support. Please. Now I give the floor to the State Party, Australia, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The questions that have been asked have been about the cultural values and their protection within the property. Australia has always managed this mixed property for its natural and cultural values, and as has been indicated, we've undertaken the process of the Tasmanian Forestry Agreement and the Tasmanian Forestry Protection Act over the recent period. My colleague, Mr. Murphy, has a statement from one of the Indigenous men from that area who was with us earlier in the week, but unfortunately has had to go home.
I have a statement from Rodney Dillon. He's a Tasmanian Aboriginal man. He was born near to this country and knows it well. For Tasmanian Aboriginal people, heritage is of crucial importance to their culture. Much of their history and culture has been destroyed and cannot be returned. The Aboriginal culture existed for thousands of years, and the heritage is what they have left. If Aboriginal heritage is destroyed, there will be no evidence of their culture for their grandchildren and their grandchildren. There will only be stories left, and no one will be able to visit and understand these special places. It also helps the wider community to understand the present, past and the present, so that we can go forward together. The heritage that Aborigines of Australia have left is a direct connection to their ancestors. Rodney strongly supports the proposed extension. It is critical to ensuring protection of his culture and history. Thank you.
Thank you. I call Rapporteur to present the text. Long marche. Donc nous pouvons commencer notre session de nouveau. Je donne la parole au rapporteur pour présenter le texte révisé.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Sorry, I have information that English is not working. Is it right? Or you have English? It's okay? Okay, merci. I would like to present the draft decision 37-8B-44, amended by Malaysia. In the first paragraph, there have been no changes. We can go down. In second paragraph, there have been no changes. In third paragraph is as proposed by the center. Paragraph 4, Malaysia proposed, and there are other delegations that joined that proposal to approve the proposed minor boundary modification. So it reads, approves the proposed minor boundary modification of the Tasmanian Wilderness, Australia, and requests the State Party to address the following concerns regarding the cultural values of the property. So this would be all, and according to that, we deleted the paragraph number 5. So if, Mr. Chair, there is no objections in the room, you can proceed to the adoptions. Thank you.
As there are no objections, I now declare decision 37-8B.44 as amended adopted. We come to another item, item C, cultural properties, C, 38.1 Arab states, Thai Lebanon. Draft decision 37.8b.45. I now invite ICOMOS to present the proposed minor modification of Thai Lebanon. ICOMOS, you have 1 minute of law.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Le bien de Tyr, Liban, a été inscrit en 1984 selon les critères 3 et 6. À cette époque, aucune délimitation exacte n'avait été définie pour le bien. On avait seulement constitué une liste d'un ensemble de vestiges archéologiques, regroupés en 2 zones distinctes, le site de la ville et le site d'Al-Bas. Le bien a attiré l'attention du Comité du patrimoine mondial depuis 1995 en raison de rapports sur des projets de modernisation dans le vieux port du centre historique de la ville, qui étaient susceptibles d'affecter les vestiges sous-marins. Pour cette raison, la création d'une zone de protection pour l'archéologie sous-marine a été demandée à plusieurs reprises, en vue de protéger les vestiges submergés. De même qu'une carte archéologique a été demandée pour l'ensemble du site de Tyr afin de pouvoir mieux définir les limites du bien inscrit. En 2010, le Comité du patrimoine mondial a adopté la déclaration rétrospective de valeur universelle exceptionnelle du bien et a pris note de la clarification des limites proposées. Le Comité pria instamment l'État partie d'établir officiellement une zone de protection maritime. Suivant. En 2011, le Comité a encouragé l'État partie à établir aussitôt que possible une zone tampon pour protéger le bien des développements tant urbains que portuaires excessifs et à cette fin de soumettre une demande de modification des limites. En 2012, le Comité du patrimoine mondial a prié l'État partie de compléter la procédure de définition d'une zone tampon du bien et également de soumettre une demande de modification mineure des limites du bien à cette fin. Suivant, s'il vous plaît. Diapositive suivante, merci. En 2013, l'État partie a soumis la présente demande de modification mineure des limites pour être soumis à évaluation. Cette demande contient 3 aspects différents. Tout d'abord, une nouvelle clarification des limites du bien tel qu'inscrit en 1984, mais avec retrait de la carte soumise en 2010 et réduction d'un certain nombre de parties significatives. Ensuite, la proposition d'une modification mineure des limites qui inclut une partie des vestiges archéologiques sous-marins au niveau de la vieille ville, mais seulement une partie limitée de ceux-ci. Et enfin, la proposition de création d'une zone tampon pour le bien inscrit qui s'étend sur 2 communes distinctes, dont la totalité de celle de Tyr. L'ICOMOS recommande que l'examen de la proposition de modification mineure des limites de la zone tampon proposée pour Tyr soit renvoyé à l'État partie afin de lui permettre d'envisager d'inclure dans le bien l'archéologie sous-marine en suivant les limites de la zone de protection d'archéologie maritime qui fait actuellement partie d'une zone en cours d'approbation, ainsi que les vestiges de la tour située le long de la rue Amra, les vestiges réenfouis de la basilique byzantine et de l'aqueduc. Afin d'élaborer une carte archéologique complète et mise à jour indiquant les vestiges physiques, les zones à potentiel archéologique, d'après les résultats des investigations les plus récentes, et les zones protégées classées qui pourraient servir de référence fiable pour la modification des limites du bien. Ensuite, d'envisager la création d'une zone tampon maritime qui n'existe pas sur la base de la protection maritime et de la protection côtière qui correspondent à des zones maritimes définies. Ensuite, de préparer une carte du district de tir, incluant les municipalités adjacentes et dont le territoire a déjà livré des vestiges archéologiques ou possède un potentiel archéologique. Enfin, de fournir des informations détaillées sur la manière dont la zone tampon fonctionnerait pour contribuer à la protection et au maintien de la valeur universelle exceptionnelle du bien dont toutes les parties prenantes sont intéressées. Merci, Monsieur le Président.
If there are no objections, I now declare decision 37,8b.45 adopted. Now we come to a new item, the Royal Tomb of Joseon Dynasty, Republic of Korea. Draft decision 37,8b.46. I now invite ECOMOS to present the proposed minor modification of Royal Tomb of the Joseon Dynasty, Republic of Korea. ECOMOS, you have the floor, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This minor boundary modification is proposed to both the property and its buffer zone for one part of the serial property of 18 sites. This modification is to correct a cartographic error made at the time of inscription. It does not alter the size of the inscribed property or of its buffer zone. ECOMOS therefore recommends that this proposal should be approved. Thank you.
If there are no objections, I now declare decision 37,8b.46 adopted. We came to the new item, Town of Luang Prabang, Lao People's Democratic Republic. Draft decision 37,8b.47. I now invite ECOMOS to present the proposed minor modification of the Town of Luang Prabang, Lao People's Democratic Republic. ECOMOS, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairperson. In 2007, a reactive monitoring mission visited the property to assist the authorities in light of illegal construction which had occurred. The mission recommended an immediate moratorium on some of the most problematic development projects and the revision of the urban plan. The mission also recommended the establishment of a buffer zone and the redefinition of the property boundaries in line with the area managed by the safeguarding plan. The request for boundary modification submitted by the state party responds to these recommendations. Next slide, please. The boundary modification increases the size of the property from 750 hectares to 820 hectares, and the proposed buffer zone of 12,560 hectares amply surrounds the property in all directions. Next slide, please. ECOMOS recommends that the proposed minor boundary modification to the boundary and the buffer zone of the town of Luang Prabang, Lao People's Democratic Republic, be approved. Thank you.
If there are no objections, I now declare decision 37,8b.47 adopted. Now we come to Baroque Church of the Philippines, draft decision 37,8b.48. I now invite ECOMOS to present the proposed minor modification of the Baroque Church of Philippines. ECOMOS, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairperson. The 4 Baroque churches in the Philippines were inscribed in 1993 on the basis of maps provided, which outlined the areas of the zones proposed for inscription. It was assumed that these zones described the boundary of the property while no further protection in form of buffer zones had been defined. The exact definition of the boundaries was requested as part of the retrospective inventory exercise in 2010. The boundary modification proposes buffer zones for all 4 property components, as well as boundary expansions of the inscribed area at 2 of the 4 components. For the Church of the Immaculate Conception of St. Augustine, seen on this slide, the newly established buffer zone of 106 hectares provides excellent protection to the property components from potential physical and also visual impacts. Next slide. The boundaries of the serial component at the Church of Nuestra Señora de la Asunción have been both extended and slightly reduced. The expanded area extends to the source, but no justification was provided for these new inclusions. The state party also proposes boundaries for a buffer zone, which includes significant parts of the surrounding city in the east and west, but no buffer zone surrounds the property boundaries to the north and south, and the rationale for this unbalanced buffer zone distribution has not been given. Next slide. For the Church of St. Augustine in Pauai, proposed property boundaries have been expanded to cover a second property component, which integrates the convent ruins of St. Augustine. However, the convent was not mentioned in the initial nomination dossier, and ICOMOS considers that further information needs to be provided by the state party as to how the convent contributes to the outstanding universal value of the series. The shared buffer zones surrounding both components appears to be sufficient to provide adequate protection for the existing property of the serial component. Next slide. The boundaries of the Church of Santo Thomas in Villanueva in Mialgo remain unchanged. The buffer zone surrounding the site provides adequate protection in 3 directions, but no buffer zone is proposed to the southwest of the property. ICOMOS considers that it would be desirable to establish a buffer zone which surrounds the property in all directions. Next slide. ICOMOS hence recommends that the proposed minor boundary modification to the boundary and buffer zone of the Church of the Immaculate Conception of St. Augustine in Manila be approved. ICOMOS recommends that the examination of the proposed minor boundary modifications to the boundary and the buffer zone of the component Church of St. Augustine in Pauai be referred back to justify the specific contribution of the convent ruins, to extend the nominated area, and to expand the buffer zone. ICOMOS recommends that the examination of the proposed buffer zone of the component of the Church of Santo Tomas in Villanueva be referred back to the state party in order to allow it to expand the buffer zone, and that the minor boundary modification to the Church of Nuestra Señora de la Asunción in Santa Maria also be referred back to the state party to allow it to justify the reduction of the property and to expand the buffer zone. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairperson.
If there are no objection, I now declare decision 37,8b.48 adopted. Now we come to Amiens Cathedral, France. I now draft decision 37,8b.49. I now invite ICOMOS to present the proposed minor modification of Amiens Cathedral, France. ICOMOS, you have the floor, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. Amiens Cathedral was inscribed in 1981 without any buffer zone, but it is protected by the 500-meter perimeter zone stipulated in the French law on historic monuments. The protective perimeter was subsequently extended in 2007 to include the 3 straight avenues which from the south converge towards the property and provide privileged vistas for a distance of some 2 kilometers. In the decision of 2011, the World Heritage Committee asked the state party to clarify the boundaries in response to the retrospective inventory. The State Party now proposes a buffer zone with a total area of 115 hectares, duly mapped out, which incorporates the existing extended zone of legal protection. The proposed buffer zone is provided with a protective mechanism according to which all construction work within the field of visibility of the monument is also subject to special consent procedures. ECOMOS considers that the proposed buffer zone well encompasses the property and protects the privileged vistas along the southern access route. And hence, next slide please, ECOMOS recommends that the proposed buffer zone for Amiens Cathedral, France, be approved.
If there are no objection, I now declare decision 37,8b.49 adopted. Now we come to Bourges Cathedral, France. Draft decision 37,8b.50. I now invite ECOMOS to present the proposed minor modification of Bourges Cathedral, France. ECOMOS, you have the floor, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairperson. The Cathedral of Saint-Étienne of Bourges was inscribed in 1992 without any buffer zone, but is also protected by the 500-meter protective perimeter stipulated by the French law. In its decision of 2011, the World Heritage Committee asked the State Party to clarify the boundaries in response to the retrospective inventory. The State Party now proposes a buffer zone with a total area of 105 hectares, duly mapped out, which incorporates and merges two existing legal protection zones. The first legal protection zone describes the safeguarding sector in which all work is subject to the consent of the Architect of Buildings of France. The second protection zone, the so-called protection perimeter, stipulates that all works located within the field of visibility of the monument are also subject to approval of the Architect of Buildings of France. ECOMOS considers that the buffer zone proposed by the State Party provides effective protection to the property. Next slide. And hence, ECOMOS recommends that the proposed buffer zone for the Cathedral of Bourges, France, be approved. Thank you.
If there are no objection, I now declare decision 37,8b.50 adopted. Now we come to Aachen Cathedral, Germany. Draft decision 37,8b.51. I now invite ECOMOS to present the proposed minor modification of Aachen Cathedral, Germany. ECOMOS, you have the floor, please.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. La cathédrale d'Aix-la-Chapelle a été inscrite en 1978. À l'époque de l'inscription, aucune zone tampon n'a été définie par ce bien du patrimoine mondial. En 2009, l'État partie a demandé une modification des délimitations du bien du patrimoine mondial ainsi qu'un changement de nom, indiquant au passage qu'une zone tampon était en préparation. Le Comité du patrimoine mondial a décidé de ne pas approuver la modification mineure des limites proposées à cette époque, considérant qu'elle aurait eu un impact négatif sur la signification et l'étendue du bien quant à sa valeur universelle. En 2012, le Comité du patrimoine mondial a pris note de clarifications concernant les limites du bien inscrit. Maintenant, en 2013, l'État partie a soumis une proposition d'établissement d'une zone tampon pour le bien inscrit. Suivant. La zone tampon proposée a vocation à préserver l'intégrité visuelle du bien inscrit. Elle englobe le tissu urbain essentiellement médiéval dans l'enceinte de la route circulaire intérieure, qui marque l'emplacement des anciennes douves de la ville. Et elle s'étend à un certain nombre d'éléments extérieurs, rues et monuments. Toutefois, la documentation complémentaire fournie n'étant pas dans l'une des deux langues de travail de la Convention, il n'a pas été possible de mener plus avant l'évaluation de cette demande de modification mineure. Suivant. Aussi, l'ICOMOS recommande que l'examen de la zone tampon soit renvoyé à l'État partie afin de lui permettre d'expliquer les motifs ayant guidé l'incorporation à la zone tampon de certaines rues et de certains monuments situés par-delà la route circulaire intérieure, d'expliquer en détail le fonctionnement des zones de protection et les mesures qui sont mises en place, notamment pour garantir l'intégrité visuelle, enfin d'expliquer le fonctionnement de la protection et l'autorité qui est en charge de l'appliquer. Je vous remercie, Monsieur le Président.
Je donne la parole à France.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Je voudrais, compte tenu du fait que nous bénéficions ici dans cette salle d'un système de traduction, peut-être on pourrait demander à l'État partie de fournir directement les explications qui sont demandées. Et je ne doute pas d'ailleurs de la compétence de nos collègues allemands et je leur fais par avance confiance sur la qualité des réponses. Et ainsi, nous pourrions peut-être adopter ce qui a été proposé.
If you have more comment, please. Donc, j'invite l'État partie Allemagne de faire les commentaires.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for allowing me to give additional information. First, I would like to express our excuses for being very brief in filling in the format requested for the implementation of a buffer zone. The concept for the buffer zone of Aachen Cathedral is one of the best developed among all German World Heritage Sites. It has been accepted by the City Council as well as by the Heritage Protection authorities on the different levels. The rationale which guided the inclusion within the buffer zone some streets located outside the inner city ring was the fact that these originally Roman streets leading to the former medieval doors in the city wall are very important for the understanding of the size of the early medieval town and for the protection of the view access to Aachen Cathedral. The buffer zone is protected as protection area according paragraph 5 and 6 of the Monument Act of the Federal State of North Rhine-Westphalia. The responsible authorities for implementation of the regulations and the coordination is the municipality of Aachen in connection with the heritage protection authorities on the local and regional level. There's a comprehensive statute for the conservation area with detailed explanation how the regulations works. We will submit, of course, a summary in one of the working languages as soon as possible. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Doctor, please.
Can we have it on the screen, please? Thank you. Nous avons reçu un amendement présenté par la France. Ça veut dire, au lieu de renvoyer l'examen, on voudrait d'abord approuver la zone tampon proposée pour la cathédrale d'Aix-la-Chapelle, Allemagne. Donc, la décision telle qu'amendée, présentée par la France, est devant vous. Et je vous invite, Monsieur le Président, de demander s'il y a d'autres commentaires. Sinon, on pourrait procéder à l'adoption de cette décision. Merci.
Merci, rapporteur. S'il y a plus de commentaires. Oui, le texte révisé est déjà présenté. Oui, il n'y a plus de commentaires. Donc, la décision 37 comme 8B.50 est adoptée. Now we come to Historic Center of Warsaw, Poland. Draft Decision 37.8B.52. I now invite ECOMOS to present the proposed minor modification of the Historic Center of Warsaw, Poland. ECOMOS, you have the floor.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Le centre historique de Varsovie, d'une superficie de 26 hectares, comprend la vieille ville médiévale à l'intérieur de ses fortifications. La ville extramuros est soumise à des pressions dues au développement, notamment des constructions de grande hauteur, toujours plus nombreuses, qui marquent de plus en plus le panorama urbain. Il n'existe actuellement pas de zone tampon ni de plan d'aménagement pour protéger le bien inscrit de l'impact de ce développement urbain, notamment les vues sur les remparts et les vues depuis les remparts. La modification proposée avec une zone tampon de 667 hectares entoure le bien pour préserver justement les relations spatiales entre le centre historique et les ensembles plus récents, et ainsi de protéger le panorama. La zone tampon est effectivement clairement délimitée et ses limites géographiques paraissent satisfaisantes. Mais l'ICOMOS considère que la proposition de zone tampon doit être assortie d'une protection légale pour son ensemble, conformément au paragraphe 104 des orientations, ce qui n'est pas encore le cas, à notre connaissance. Aussi, l'ICOMOS recommande que l'examen de la zone tampon proposée pour le centre historique de Varsovie-Pologne soit renvoyé à l'État partie afin de lui permettre de fournir des informations détaillées sur la protection offerte par la zone tampon en tant que monument de l'histoire et au titre de la loi sur la protection et la tutelle des monuments, et d'envisager la protection légale et la réglementation de la zone tampon dans son ensemble par l'inscription au registre du patrimoine national. Merci, Monsieur le Président.
I open the floor for comment. No comment. If there are no objection, I now declare decision 37,8b.52 adopted. We come to garrison border town of Elva and its fortification, Portugal. Draft decision number 37,8b.53. I now invite ICOMOS to present the proposed minor modification of the garrison border town of Elvas and its fortification, Portugal. ICOMOS, you have the floor, please.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Le site fortifié d'Elvas couvre de manière extensive un ensemble de grande ampleur construit du XVIIe au XIXe siècle. C'est l'un des plus vastes de ce type dans le monde. La déclaration de valeur universelle exceptionnelle approuvée par le Comité de 2012 notait: les vues des fortifications à distance et entre elles sont vulnérables à de nouveaux développements et l'intégrité visuelle du bien a besoin d'être protégée par une zone tampon légèrement élargie, avec des contrôles adéquats. Elle précisait également qu'il est nécessaire d'élargir la zone tampon afin de protéger les vues entre le fortin São Domingo et le fort de Gracia. L'ICOMOS considère que l'extension proposée bénéficiera de la même protection que la zone tampon d'origine et qu'elle est conforme aux éléments requis en matière de protection et de gestion des zones tampons. Aussi, l'ICOMOS recommande que la zone tampon proposée pour la ville et garnison frontalière d'Elvas et ses fortifications Portugal soit approuvée. Merci, Monsieur le Président.
If there is no objection, I now declare decision 37,8b.53 adopted. We come to the new point, Historic Center of St. Petersburg and related group of Monument, Russian Federation. Draft decision 37,8b.54. I now invite ICOMOS to present the proposed minor modification of the Historic Center of St. Petersburg and related group of Monument, Russian Federation. ECOMOS, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. In 1990, the property of the Historic Centre of St. Petersburg and related groups of monuments was inscribed as a serial property of 136 components. These are spread out over a large area around St. Petersburg, some up to 100 kilometers from the city centre. The Historic Centre of St. Petersburg is the largest component of this serial property and the only one with defined boundaries at the time of inscription. In 2006, the World Heritage Committee requested the state party to submit a precise definition of the boundaries of the inscribed components and of their respective buffer zones. Between 2007 and 2009, the state party submitted this cartographic documentation in which the delimitations of the boundaries of the main component of the Historic Centre of St. Petersburg were different from those presented at the time of inscription. Since then, there have been 2 reactive monitoring missions to the property which have discussed these issues. These were in 2009 and 2010. Next slide, please. Following these missions, the committee requested the state party to explore 2 options for the boundary clarifications or modifications. The first option was to reduce the boundaries of the 1990 inscription and renominate the property. The second option was to retain the boundaries of the 1990 inscription and to modify them to bring them in line with national legal status. The committee also recommended the organization of an international expert forum to evaluate proposals. Such an expert forum was set up, and an ICOMOS expert was present at 2 of its meetings. This forum opted for the second option of keeping the boundaries as at the time of inscription and modifying them to bring them in line with the legal zones in force. The state party states that this process has allowed the boundary to be clarified through extending it in some places and decreasing it elsewhere. The present request for a minor boundary modification is for the main component part of the property only, and is therefore a preliminary step towards strengthening the protection of the property. The buffer zone remains to be addressed. Within this request for a boundary modification, the overall size of the main component is reduced from 4,034 hectares to 3,934 hectares, which is a reduction of 100.2 hectares. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. ICOMOS recommends that this minor boundary modification be approved. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
If there are no objections...
I beg your pardon. Can we just... I'm so sorry. Could I just touch on the following slide? ICOMOS further recommends that the state party give consideration to the 4 issues, which is modifying the protection zones, where necessary, to cover those portions of the territory that are proposed to be included in the scribed property and that are not currently covered by an adequate level of protection, to establishing a buffer zone as requested by the committee, and modifying the juridical status of the component part, the main component of the Historic Centre of St. Petersburg within the Russian legal framework. And fourthly, to developing a comprehensive management framework for the entire inscribed property, together with a management plan on the basis of a detailed and urban and safeguard plans to be elaborated as early as possible. Thank you.
So if there are no objections, I give the floor to Estonia.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Don't worry, we are not going to object. Vice versa, we would like to commend the state party Russia, who, together with missions and the help of international experts, have tried to clear up the mess from the Soviet period cartographic documents. And we know from our own experience that this is not at all an easy task. But still we have a question to the ICOMOS. It is said here that this is the first part of the 2-phase clarification of this serial property. Could you please explain what is the difference between the first and second phase? Thank you.
First you have the floor. Yes.
Thank you. May I respond? May I respond, and perhaps a colleague from the World Heritage Centre would like to add something as well. This modification is for the main component of the property only. We still await any modifications to the remaining components of the property, which are extensive. At the same time as this process is going on, of minor boundary modifications, there's a parallel process for clarifying the boundaries. So perhaps I could ask my colleague from the World Heritage Centre to clarify that.
Would you like to please, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. And I thank also Estonia to ask this question, because we gather that this proposed minor boundary modification raised some question, and we would like to clarify, because actually, as it was already said by ICOMOS and also mentioned by Estonia, this is a very complex serial site, and as it was inscribed in 1990, it was not really clear what was inscribed, and we studied in depth the nomination. We discovered that many components presented in the list of that nomination were not actually existing. So we asked the state party to work on this, and actually, as it was mentioned, an expert forum established a working group in which are included also ICOMOS and the World Heritage Center to work together towards a clarification of the boundaries. Now, as it is a very complex site that include serial site in the region and one of the largest historic centers that are inscribed on the World Heritage list, the state party, in order to improve the legal protection of the historic center of St. Petersburg, proceeded with the minor boundarification of this component part first. But as it is said, and you have to also see this minor boundary modification in parallel with the clarification that is presented in document 8D, there will be a second part of this clarification that will deal with all the related sites. So for the time being, this minor boundary modification is going to strengthen the protection of the historic center of St. Petersburg, but there will be a second part that will deal with all the other related sites. I hope that this clarified your question.
Any more comment? Russian, please. You have the floor.
Нет, у меня нет замечаний, у меня слова благодарности в адрес Центра всемирного наследия и КАМОС за большую качественную работу, которую они проводили и проводят по модификации границ объекта исторический центр Санкт-Петербурга и смежные группы памятников, и также по инвентаризации, собственно, этого большого громадного наследия. Еще раз спасибо.
If there is no act of opposition, I now declare the decision 37.8b.54 adopted. Now we come to another item. Burgos Cathedral, Spain. Draft decision 37.8b.55. I now invite ICOMOS to present the proposed minor modification of Burgos Cathedral, Spain. ICOMOS, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Burgos Cathedral was inscribed in 1984 with no buffer zone. In 1993, part of the route of Santiago de Compostela, serial property, was inscribed also in Burgos, and these two properties overlap to a degree. This minor boundary modification is for a buffer zone for Burgos Cathedral, and ICOMOS considers that the buffer zone is adequate to protect the cathedral in terms of its delineation. However, the management arrangements are not clear, nor is the relationship between the Burgos Cathedral property and the component part of the serial property. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. ICOMOS therefore recommends that the examination of this proposal be referred back to the State Party in order to allow it to provide a detailed overview of the site management arrangements for the proposed buffer zone in relation to both World Heritage properties, and also to provide a map showing the relationship between the two World Heritage properties, the Burgos Cathedral and the route of Santiago de Compostela within Burgos. Thank you.
There is a proposal for referral. If we have comment, please. No comment. So if there are no objections, I now declare decision 37, 8B.55 adopted. So we come to the new item. Statement of outstanding universal value of the 4 property inscribed at the 36th session, St. Petersburg, and not adopted by the World Heritage Committee. We will now continue with our item agenda 8B and proceed with adoption of the 4 statements of outstanding universal value of property inscribed at the 36th session in St. Petersburg last year. You will find the 4 statements in document 8B.8.2. I now invite Mr. Balsamo from the center to present this point. Mr. Balsamo, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. At its last session in 2012 in St. Petersburg, the committee provisionally adopted 4 statements of outstanding universal value of properties which were originally recommended for deferral and referral. The 4 statements concern the following properties: Rio de Janeiro Carioca landscapes between the mountain and the sea, Brazil; Western Ghats, India; Birthplace of Jesus, Church of the Nativity and the Pilgrimage Route, Bethlehem, Palestine; and Lena Pillars Nature Park, Russian Federation. The documents relating to this point are 8B at 2 and 8B at 2 core. We issued and distributed to you document 8 at 2 core as we proceeded to a minor correction to the text concerning the integrity of Lena Pillars Nature Park. The 4 statements are now ready for adoption by the committee in agreement with all the state party concerned. Draft decision 37,8B56 is on page 2 of the English and page 1 of the French version of document 8B at 2. Thank you.
I give Germany, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Germany supports this resolution and is ready to take part in the adoption of this decision. With regard to the denomination Palestine in this document, I would like to give to the protocol that we would like to refer to our explanations of vote in the UNESCO General Conference on the 31st of October 2011 and in the UN Assembly on the 29th of November 2012. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Je donne la parole à la France.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Je voudrais dire bien sûr tout de suite que la France ne s'oppose absolument pas à l'adoption de ces décisions, mais je voudrais simplement faire un petit commentaire, car en lisant la déclaration, et en particulier celle de l'Église de la Nativité à Bethléem, je voudrais faire part, même seulement de mon point de vue personnel, de ma déception quant à la qualité de rédaction en français de ce texte. Il me semble que nos documents du patrimoine mondial, et surtout quand ils se rapportent à un tel monument, devraient faire preuve d'un soin de rédaction, d'une ambition de rédaction qui me semblerait quand même en rapport. Et ça n'est pas le cas. D'ailleurs, je voudrais faire aussi une autre petite remarque. Il me semble que ces déclarations sont bien souvent trop longues et qu'il faudrait qu'elles aient un esprit de synthèse et de concision plus marqué. Je vous remercie, Monsieur le Président.
Il y a d'autres commentaires, please? Non. Donc, I call on rapporteur, please.
La décision. Merci, Monsieur le Président, de m'avoir donné la parole. J'ai juste un ajout technique. Ici, il s'agit de la décision 1337 comme 8B addendum de corrigendum qui portait uniquement sur l'intégrité du bien de Fédération de Russie, parc naturel des colonnes de la LENA, qu'on a ajouté à ce document. Donc, c'est tout ce que j'ai à dire, Monsieur le Président. Vous pouvez procéder à l'adoption de la décision.
If there is no objection, I declare the decision 37, 8B.56 adopted. Now we come to another new item, 8D. Clarification of property boundary and size by state party in response to the retrospective inventory. Document WAC 13/37.com/8D. Clarification of property boundary and area by state party in response to the retrospective inventory. We shall now move to our agenda. Yes. Please refer to document WAC 13.37.com/8D. This document presents the result of the retrospective inventory of nomination file of property inscribed on the World Heritage List between 1978 and 1998, and in particular, this document presents certified boundary clarification received from 13 state parties as an answer to the retrospective inventory. I now invite Mrs. Metzl-Rossler to present the item.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. The document AD is in front of you. This project was initiated in 2004 to collect data such as boundaries or area of properties in hectares for early inscribed World Heritage properties. In fact, most of these early inscriptions did not contain very important data, such as maps with the boundaries of the property or its buffer zone. Sometimes this data had neither been read registered nor inventoried, and this is why the committee at its 7th extraordinary session decided to start this retrospective inventory project to collect missing information from these early inscriptions. At this point, I would like to underline that this project is an activity that is suffering from the current financial crisis, and we welcome any extra budgetary funds or contribution that state parties may offer to continue the project in the future. At the last session, the committee requested state parties to submit the requested boundary clarifications by 1st December 2012, and as the chairperson has said, you find 35 boundary clarifications in the document. The decision is in front of you on page 3 of the document. Thank you very much.
Some comment, please. So I propose, if there are no more comment, I propose the adoption of the draft decision 37, Com AD adopted, and item 8D closed. We shall now move to our agenda item 8E, adoption of retrospective statement of outstanding universal value. Please refer to document WAC 13/37.com/8E. This document presents the draft decision concerning the adoption of 198 retrospective statements of outstanding universal value submitted by 58 state parties for properties which had no statement approved at the time of their inscription on the World Heritage List. The retrospective statement of outstanding universal value are included in the Annex 1 of this document. I now invite Mrs. Bastille-Rosler to present the item.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. You have two documents in front of you, 8E and 8E add. This document contains 196 retrospective statements of outstanding universal value from 58 state parties for properties which so far had no statement approved at the time of the inscription on the World Heritage List. In the addendum 8E add, you have two further retrospective statements of OUV which had been submitted according to the deadline and should be adopted with the other statements. In total, we received 67 statements from Latin America and the Caribbean, 65 statements from Europe and North America, 60 statements from Asia and the Pacific, 5 statements from Africa, and 1 statement from the Arab states. I would also like to inform you that we received a letter dated 20th June 2013 by the Director General of the Archaeological Survey of India withdrawing 5 statements of OUV as follows: the Ajanta Cave, Champana Pavagadh Archaeological Park, the Buddhist monuments at Sanchi, Ellora Caves, and Fatehpur Sikri. With your agreement, we will remove those from the list of sites for which the statements would be adopted in your decision. I also would like to make another remark here. We received a very high number of retrospective statements of OUV this year. I believe, Mr. Chair, it's the biggest document we have at this session, and we are facing quite a lot of constraints concerning the translations of these documents. So I would like to take the opportunity to appeal to state parties to provide either financial supports for the translation translation or support us with direct translations in the 2 working languages, English and French, respectively. Mr. Chair, the decision is in front of you on page 3 in the English version and page 3 in the French. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
I thank Mr. Rosler for your explanation. Now I would like to invite State Party to express their comment on this document WAC 13/37.com/8E and to adopt the draft decision 37.8E in the entirety. No comment. Rapporteur, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would just like to show the changes in the document. So this is the 37.8E, and please go down. We want to show that we strike out the, as it was explained by the Secretariat, the 5 sites proposed by India. Okay? So this is, we are going to take out these. And now, Mr. Chair, you can proceed to the adoption of this document. Thank you very much.
There is no comment. I declare the draft decision 37.8E adopted and item 8E closed. We can now move to the next item of our agenda, item 9, which concerns the progress report on the upstream processes. This is a document WAC 13/37.com/9 that you have in front of you. I would like to invite Mr. Rao to briefly present this item. Mr. Rao, you have the floor, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. This document on the upstream process continues the work that was initiated within the framework of the reflection on the future of the convention. And one of the recommendations from that process was that nominations facing significant problems should be reduced. The number of nominations facing such problems should be reduced. And therefore, the committee approved the initiation of an experimental voluntary process of providing upstream support to states parties for developing good nominations, which could then be evaluated and considered by the committee. Now, this process envisaged a very close collaboration between states parties and the advisory bodies, and the committee proposed that on an experimental basis, about 2 sites per region should form part of this experimental process. So what this document contains, Mr. President, is a progress report on each of these 10 sites, but over and above that, I would like to mention that the advisory bodies have engaged with many states parties in providing support in the process of reviewing tentative lists as well as reviewing draft nomination documents and providing upstream support. The point I wish to emphasize is that upstream support by the advisory bodies and by the Secretariat is not limited only to these 10 experimental sites, but also to many more sites. And one of the important sites which will come up for consideration next year is the one on the Kapak Nyan, which involves 6 countries. It's a major transnational serial nomination. as well as the Silk Road nomination, which in the first phase involves 6 countries, but would also extend later on to an additional 6 countries. So these are huge transnational nominations which require a lot of support from the advisory bodies and the Secretariat, and that support is being provided. Mr. Chairman, the other point to note is that among these 10 sites which formed part of the initial so-called experiment on a voluntary basis, one of the sites was inscribed. The site in Namibia was inscribed 2 days ago on the World Heritage List, which established the utility of this upstream support. You would note from the document that progress in relation to some of these sites has been poor, and the main problem has been the provision of financial resources to support this process. The engagement of advisory bodies in the process on an ongoing basis requires financial commitment, either on the part of the state party concerned, or by seeking assistance from the World Heritage Fund, or in many cases mobilizing funds from extra budgetary sources. So that has been the main limiting factor and the main lesson learned from this process. The committee may wish to take note of this progress and support the ongoing process to its conclusion in the future. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much, Kishore, for this interesting presentation. I would like to remind you that we are also invited to adopt the draft decision 37(9) included in point 3 of the document. Are there any comments?
Wait, sorry. Before that, Pete Kamos and IUCN want to make comment.
So before I invite the member of the committee, I give the floor to the advisory body, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. IUCN welcomes upstream process as a forward-looking approach aimed at strengthening the preparation of World Heritage nominations through an early communication and continuous expert advice provided by the advisory bodies to the state parties. IUCN commends this effort as an attempt to make the World Heritage nomination process even more transparent and result-oriented. As a result of the strenuous effort of Namibia and IUCN this year, we have seen the inscription of the Namib Sensi as the first successfully completed nomination out of the 10 selected pilot projects at the 35th World Heritage Committee session in 2011. The cooperation achieved between the African World Heritage Fund, working with the state parties, center, and advisory bodies is central to this successful outcome. IUCN welcomes the support provided by the state parties and anticipates further progress on preparing nomination files in an upstream manner. Recognizing various challenges stemming from such an approach, the diversity of selected pilot projects, additional capacity building needs, and resources required for its proper implementation, IUCN remains committed to supporting the state parties in their attempt to enhance their work on World Heritage, such as the joint work on preparing tentative lists and nominations in the Arab region, the IUCN Regional Office for West Asia has contributed to, with the Arab Resource Center on World Heritage in Bahrain, and the support to the 2 upstream projects in Southeast Europe that IUCN Program Office for Southeastern Europe is advising. All IUCN offices are committed to this effort, and the workshop held earlier this year on the IUCN World Heritage Program with the support of the government of Germany discussed how we could adopt new working methods across all of our regional offices and programs. Our aim is to improve the quality of tentative lists and build capacity ahead of the work to submit nomination files and overall enhancement of the World Heritage process. IUCN therefore hopes the full attention of the international community will be given to the need for implementation of this innovative tool and supports further development of its principles, including how to mainstream the concept into the operational guidelines of the Convention. Mr. Chair, ICOMOS has further comments. Thank you.
The floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The last committee demonstrated how upstream processes are rapidly becoming mainstream, as the words were included in a committee decision for a nomination from India for the first time. During the last year, ICOMOS has been increasingly requested to offer upstream advice in various formal and less formal ways, as indicated by Mr. Rao. The idea of one-to-one advice associated with an advisory mission appears to us to be a helpful way of engagement with state parties. This work often goes beyond advice on already identified nominations to include advice on the tentative list processes. Furthermore, increasingly, tools that support the nomination process are coming into focus. Thematic studies, for instance, that help state parties with tentative lists and with comparative studies, and also post-inscription, what might be called downstream work, and midstream work after properties have been referred back to state parties. The limiting factors with this work are resources. Currently, the resources available to the advisory bodies to undertake upstream work are heavily dependent on the support of state parties and on the already oversubscribed International Assistance Fund. Therefore, priorities need to be set, and perhaps there is a need to reflect on the comparative usefulness of various different upstream approaches. How valuable are thematic studies? Should the advisory body's gap study be updated? Is site-specific advice more useful? Should tentative lists be seen as sites that might have the potential to be nominated, subject to greater development of the ability of them to demonstrate their outstanding universal value? ICOMOS welcomes the upstream processes and considers that the emergence of them marks a very significant shift in the engagement between the advisory bodies and states parties. It seems that giving this process a name has opened up positive possibilities and removed the idea of inscription being a confrontational process to one where dialogue at an early stage can be highly beneficial without compromising the overall evaluation process. Thank you.
I give the floor to India, please.
Thank you, Chair. Let me take note of the efforts of the advisory bodies to engage in a dialogue. That is fundamental to the work that the committee is looking at. It's fundamental to the convention. There is an asymmetry. One of the advisory bodies, IUCN, is an intergovernmental body with regional offices, a much larger structure, and probably better resourced. One of the advisory bodies, unfortunately, is not. So it is more event-based, it has fewer resources, and this asymmetry is reflected in the kind of output that we're getting. For instance, the Namibian experience. On the positive side, I think ICOMOS has made strenuous efforts. The Russian case, which took so much of our time yesterday, the fact that ICOMOS actually engaged in a post-evaluation dialogue, I think, is extremely welcome and important. But the International Assistance Fund no longer has the capability and is probably unlikely to have the resources in the short run to support any efforts. Mr. Chair, I have this is not just about resources and inscriptions and site specificity. It is also about attitudes and procedures. And I think that we need to be able to engage in a much more intensive dialogue amongst the state parties. I have a very specific suggestion, which is that the September meeting that IUCN offered actually take up this issue. You need to be able to think of ways that in which you could go ahead. Secondly, that we need to look at the rules of procedure. We need to look at the operational guidelines. We need to look at the non-structured areas of interaction in a much, much more positive way. It has been the perception that at least a part of the work of the advisory bodies is conducted in secret, which is not in the public domain. And we've made this point before, that if the proceedings of the committee itself are being live telecast and available across the world, then we need to be able to have a system by which the processes, if not the actual evaluators, are clearly identified, are available, and this information is shared. These are serious matters, and I don't think a resolution or another resolution is going to make a difference. I think we need to think about this much more deeply. Thank you, Chair. I do have a very specific request from a member state of our region, which is the Maldives, which has informed UNESCO that it has been having a problem in the upstream process for a nomination that they wish to develop in their Coral Islands, and that they have not got a response from ICOMOS as yet. I'm sure ICOMOS can correct that. I'm sure they will be able to correct that. I'm sure they have begun that process. Thank you.
More comment, please. Estonia.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Due to the complexity of a nomination process for states parties and the amount of work, time and money it involves, it is understandable that the states parties would like the advisory bodies, who under the convention are supposed to advise the committee, to also offer advice to the nominating states throughout the whole process. Estonia fully believes in the need to interact with states parties from a very early stage. In order to be really effective, however, the upstream support should ideally come at an earlier stage in the process, starting from the revision of the tentative lists. But as we have emphasized, this can only happen at the invitation of a state party. It's important to establish that the property has the potential to justify the OUV before the development of a whole nomination dossier, which is expensive and time-consuming. The progress report concerning the 10 selected pilot projects shows the first achievement of this process that led to the inscription of a Namib Sand Sea, as Mr. Rao already mentioned. But there is also another side of the coin. We can see that there are some cases where the state party is still in the phase of nominating a focal point for the process, and we can also clearly see that the current financial situation makes it impossible to provide for all activities related to the convention, including conservation and management, which is a top priority, as well as preparatory assistance for preparation of nomination files that many states parties require. So in order for our upstream process not to go down the drain, the clear link to the budget needs to be emphasized to ensure that the best possible technical assistance is provided in the preparation of nominations. Thank you.
I yield the floor to Colombia, please.
Gracias, señor presidente. Muy brevemente, revisando el documento que nos fue presentado, quisiera hacer referencia al párrafo 16, donde se informa acerca del proyecto piloto Cultural and Industrial Landscape of Fray Bentos en Uruguay. De acuerdo con ese párrafo, se señala que un experto de ICOMOS visitó el sitio y sostuvo reuniones con las autoridades locales. Se señala en el documento que pues, la información no ha sido enviada de manera completa, pero sin embargo quisiera pedirle al representante de ICOMOS si nos pudiera presentar algún tipo de información sobre su visita a este lugar, independientemente de que no se haya recibido por parte del Estado parte. Era simplemente para tener esa aclaración, señor presidente. Gracias.
Before inviting ICOMOS, I give the floor to Mexico, please.
Muchas gracias, señor presidente. Es un comentario general a partir del comentario del distinguido embajador de la India. en el sentido de que el trabajo, hablaré brevemente del caso mexicano, el trabajo que hemos venido desarrollando con el organismo asesor, pensemos con los organismos asesores, pero hablo específicamente del caso de ICOMOS, es de un diálogo que ha habido permanente, inclusive con su presidente, justamente sobre estos temas y con las personas responsables de la evaluación de los estados de conservación de los sitios, para llegar justamente a implementar un trabajo conjunto que vaya ahorrando los procesos y que nos permita desde un principio, tanto en listas indicativas como en valores universales, tener una posición ya muy definida si realmente el sitio que se pudiera presentar a nominación cuenta con ese valor universal excepcional. Hay muchas dificultades regionales para poder implementar correctamente estos mecanismos, pero depende de la región y del compromiso que tenga cada Estado parte, pero creo que la voluntad tanto de los organismos asesores como de los Estados partes interesados es importante, hay que destacarla, y desde luego, bueno, el tema financiero siempre será un inconveniente, pero se puede ir trabajando conjuntamente, no vemos mayor problema, y sí es importante que se haga ese trabajo conjunto, siempre acompañados del Centro de Patrimonio Mundial.
Je donne la parole à la Sénégal, please.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Je pense que, comme tout le monde a eu à le dire, les organisations consultatives sont extrêmement importantes pour nous. Bien évidemment, la nature des contacts et des relations est fonction de plusieurs paramètres. L'UICN a des bureaux dans de nombreux pays ou par région, ce qui permet d'avoir un partenaire identifiable pratiquement tout le temps. Et ça facilite beaucoup les contacts. À l'inverse, l'ICOMOS n'a pas ce type de structure, mais il peut y avoir des commissions, des comités nationaux ICOMOS qui fonctionnent et qui peuvent être bien sûr en relation avec la structure centrale. Je pense qu'il y a une réflexion probablement à faire au niveau de chaque pays ou de chaque région. J'ai souvent parlé d'aménagement, c'est important en Afrique, c'est important d'ailleurs partout dans le monde. Et comme vous le savez, de plus en plus, il y a des études d'impact qui sont liées aux aménagements du territoire. Je pense qu'il y a probablement possibilité dans ce domaine-là, y compris en Afrique, de faire de telle sorte que les États puissent envisager la question des études d'impact non pas seulement en termes environnementaux, mais en termes culturels. Ce qui permettrait, à mon avis, de faire de telle sorte que de nombreux sites puissent bénéficier des financements en provenance des études d'impact et que des connexions puissent être établies avec les experts de l'ICOMOS pour aider à mieux apprécier, à mieux analyser, à mieux préparer les dossiers d'inscription, parce que très nombreux sites sont confrontés à ce type d'études d'impact, mais l'impact c'est malheureusement seulement naturel, alors qu'il devrait être naturel et culturel à la fois. Je pense que nous avons une réflexion à mener à ce niveau-là. Merci.
Marjorie, vous avez la parole, please.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. L'Algérie salue les résultats obtenus grâce aux efforts consentis par le Centre du patrimoine mondial, les organes consultatifs et les États parties dans la mise en œuvre du processus en amont, et les résultats sont là avec l'exemple de la Namibie. Toutefois, et au-delà des questions financières dont nous avons bien conscience, nous pensons que ce processus en amont devrait être étendu aux listes indicatives Et nous rejoignons là ce qui vient d'être dit par l'Estonie. Certaines listes indicatives sont établies avec des experts de l'UNESCO lorsque cela est possible, et d'autres pays le font seuls, sans l'assistance des experts. Les pays qui le font avec l'assistance des experts sont assurés que les sites qui sont inscrits sur la liste du patrimoine mondial ont une valeur universelle exceptionnelle. Croient le savoir. Mais au cours du processus donc, de soumission des dossiers, il se pourrait que le pays ne soit pas soutenu pour être aidé dans le processus en amont, dans l'élaboration des dossiers. Lorsque nous arrivons à l'étude du dossier, la valeur universelle exceptionnelle, parfois, est remise en question. Nous voudrions poser la question de la responsabilité de l'expert qui agit aussi bien au niveau des listes indicatives, en dehors du processus, lorsqu'il est requis par l'État partie, et dans le processus en amont, en ce qui concerne uniquement la valeur universelle exceptionnelle qui pourrait être remise en cause. Nous sommes confiants et nous remercions les organes consultatifs pour tout le travail et les efforts qu'ils font dans l'assistance, et notamment en Algérie dans l'assistance qu'ils nous donnent. Mais nous voudrions savoir quelle est la part de responsabilité de l'expert qui décide qu'il y a une valeur universelle exceptionnelle et qui, au niveau du panel d'experts, est remise en question. Peut-être que dans le système proposé du processus en amont, s'il venait à être élargi aux listes indicatives, ce serait peut-être aussi il y a des solutions à apporter. Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Before inviting the other committee member, I think I ask Mr. Director of the Center to make some clarification.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, and thank you to Algeria for having raised that question. This is indeed a very important point that you have raised, and if you recall, the whole process of providing upstream support must start with the tentative list. It is very essential that the first step in the whole nomination process is the right step, and we are assured that the tentative list is credible and the sites within that tentative list have the potential to morph into credible nominations as well. Having said that, the tentative lists cannot assure that the outstanding universal value is established in all cases. What it can sort of reveal at that first initial stage is the potential for a particular site to meet the criteria and to stand the test of outstanding universal value. It's very difficult to establish finally that this site has the outstanding universal value. It's a process that has to be established by comparative analysis and the whole process of further work that has to be done in developing a nomination dossier. So at the stage of tentative list, it is a list of potential sites which have the possibility of meeting the criteria and the potential to demonstrate outstanding universal value. So these are potential sites. So it cannot be guaranteed that these sites will all lead to successful nominations. That is the first step. The second step of elaborating nomination dossiers, of course, the intensive engagement process that we have envisaged in this experimental process is not possible in all cases because, again, of resource, time constraints, personnel constraints. So that has to be also borne in mind. Once the expertise has been made available by the advisory bodies to the concerned state party for reviewing and updating the tentative lists, it then depends on the ability of the advisory body to follow up on the development of nominations. The cases that have been mentioned in this document are those where an intensive engagement has been made possible, and as you can see, that has not been uniform across all the cases and in all the regions. But in the development of each and every nomination, whether or not that kind of a close collaboration is possible is questionable. It depends on resources, personnel, structures of the individual advisory bodies, as has been commented on by many members. Thank you, Mr. President.
Je vais continuer. Je donne la parole à la France.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Je voudrais dire que la France fait tout à fait écho aux préoccupations qui ont été exprimées par notre collègue l'ambassadeur de l'Inde et également aussi par celui du Sénégal. Nous sommes très sensibles, nous soutenons tous ces efforts d'un dialogue, d'un véritable dialogue plus ouvert et plus facile avec les organisations consultatives, même si nous sommes bien conscients des difficultés financières et administratives qui se présentent. Il est vrai quant à l'ICOMOS que la présence de comités nationaux de par le monde devrait être une ressource peut-être plus employée pour justement faciliter ces relations et ces concurrences ou ces convergences d'avis et d'expertise. Souvent, il faudrait pouvoir rechercher un dialogue plus transparent, plus ouvert. Après tout, il s'agit d'évaluer les biens, leur qualité, et les experts des différents pays devraient pouvoir plus librement aborder entre eux des questions de fond. Et on a parfois l'impression un petit peu de cloisons un peu trop étanches, de dialogues qui n'aboutissent pas vraiment, en tout cas, à aller au fond du débat. Voilà, je me borne à ces remarques. Je vous remercie, Monsieur le Président.
See, I call on Germany, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Sorry. And thank you, Director of the Center, for the clarification on the role of tentative lists in this. And I would like to add 2 comments on this. Indeed, tentative list processes are important in the upstream process, but there is a big difference between what the tentative list is and the nomination is. And in my view, the upstream process advice which can be given to a state party is extremely important, but it's not so important on giving advice on an individual property being included in one of the tentative lists. The advice, in my view, should more relate to the methodology and the processes a state party can establish within its own country to set up a proper tentative list. And the advice could a lot relate to what instruments are out there, such as gap analysis, thematic studies, process-oriented advice, how to best make use of the capacities within one country to be able to set up a well-established tentative list. So I would like to stress again, it's not so much a single expert's advice on one or the other property to be included in a tentative list, but a big step forward to a better capacity building within countries to setting up proper tentative lists. And then, based on this, as it was said before, the comparative analysis and the other steps come up to put a nomination forward. And I think this is important to be beared in mind when we talk about upstream advice on tentative lists. Thank you.
Donne la parole à la Suisse, please.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Ce que nous appelons le processus en amont dans son sens large, donc englobant le travail sur les listes indicatives, et là nous soutenons pleinement ce que vient de dire notre collègue de l'Allemagne, mais aussi la mise en œuvre des résultats des rapports périodiques, notamment au niveau régionaux et subrégionaux. Donc ce processus en amont est un instrument extrêmement important pour augmenter le dialogue, la transparence, comme on en a souvent parlé pendant cette session déjà. Nous pensons aussi que ce processus aide finalement à économiser de l'argent, notamment pour les États parties, parce qu'ils évitent le développement de candidatures coûteuses qui à la fin peut-être n'arrivent pas à être inscrites sur la liste du patrimoine mondial. En revanche, il est clair que un renforcement du processus en amont aura des incidences budgétaires. Et à un moment donné, nous pensons qu'il faut se décider. Si on demande plus d'actions dans ce sens, il faut aussi être d'accord à augmenter les moyens pour le patrimoine mondial. Merci, Monsieur le Président.
I give the floor to United Arab Emirates, please.
شكرا سيد الرئيس. الإمارات عبر الفترة الماضية من بين الدول التي عبرت عن رغبتها الشديدة في رفع مستوى التعاون والتنسيق بين الدول الأعضاء والجهات الاستشارية. ونحن نعتقد اليوم بأهمية هذا الحوار لأنه ينعكس على أدائنا العام تجاه حفظ وصون التراث العالمي بشكل عام عبر عملياته المختلفة، بدءا من التسجيل الأولي للقائمة والتفكير بالترشيحات، وبالتالي النظر إلى القواعد العمل المنظمة وإلى التوجيهات وإلى كل هذه الأمور المتصلة. يعني يمكن التعامل معها عبر فترات مختلفة من خلال هذه العلاقة التي يجب أن نحرص على تشجيعها بين الدول الأعضاء والجهات الاستشارية ومركز التراث العالمي. نحن ندرك أنه شريك أساسي وهو يسهر على إنجاح هذا العمل الذي نقوم به. لذلك أنا أتفق مع من سبقني في الحديث والاقتراحات التي تمت الإشارة إليها. احنا فقط أود أن أضيف أنه هناك دول مقتدرة تقدر تحصل على الاستشارة وتتحمل نفقاتها، ولذلك يعني يجب أن يراعى هذا الجانب. وهناك دول لا تستطيع تحمل هذه الاستشارة. يعني ونحن نتكلم عن الموارد المالية، يمكن التعامل مع فكرة الدول ذات الحاجة والدول الممكن أن تتحمل هي نفقات هذا التنسيق بينها وبين الجهات الاستشارية. ولكن نحن في عملنا في هذه اللجنة وضمن إطار هذه الاتفاقية لا نتحرك بمعزل عن أن كل شيء يتغير حوالينا، الأفكار والتنظيمات، لذلك يعني علينا أن ننفتح أكثر وأن نتعامل بشفافية أمام كل المشكلات التي تواجهنا. وهدفنا في النهاية هو هدف مشترك، ليس هناك طرف ضد طرف. نحن نشتغل كأسرة واحدة، يهمنا أن ننعم بما حظينا به من روائع التراث العالمي والحفاظ عليها وإبرازها ووفقا للفرص المتكافئة بين كل الدول. شكرا.
La parole à Mali, please.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Monsieur le Président, en parlant des processus en amont, je voudrais insister un peu sur le cas des listes indicatives. Et à notre avis, le dialogue doit être instauré, parce qu'en réalité, de quoi est-ce qu'il s'agit? Il s'agit d'une sélection de biens qui, dans l'avenir, seraient inscrits ou bien proposés sur la liste du patrimoine mondial. Et une des conditions pour que ce bien soit même accepté, il faut que le bien existe d'abord sur la liste indicative. Donc nous pensons que si les organes consultatifs sont initiés avec l'État parti ou bien les États partis dès le début, ça va non seulement empêcher un certain nombre de problèmes, mais aussi faciliter l'inscription des biens dans l'avenir. Donc pour ce faire, nous souhaiterions que vraiment des ressources consistantes soient accordées à ces organes consultatifs-là. En plus des organes consultatifs, il y a aussi les centres de catégorie 2 qui assurent également cette formation. Il y a mieux, les centres de renforcement des capacités. Je pense à un programme extrêmement intéressant, Africa 2009, qui malheureusement est arrivé à expiration et qui nous a beaucoup permis d'améliorer la représentativité des sites africains sur la liste du patrimoine mondial. Je pense également à l'école du patrimoine africain et je pense également au fonds du patrimoine mondial pour l'Afrique. Donc ce sont là vraiment des initiatives à encourager, à accompagner, et c'est pour un meilleur renforcement du dialogue entre les États parties et les organes consultatifs. Je vous remercie.
I give the floor to Japan, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairperson. As we also echo to all other state parties' comments about how important to think about this upstream process in the broader sense, from the preparation of the tentative list to the nomination, the submission of the nomination files. All state parties are struggling the time-consuming process of how to prepare the nomination files. And also, we also understand is the constraints of the resources, of the constraints of the advisory bodies. We have started this discussion several years ago at this Phuket meeting on upstream process, and we discussed how to improve the process, how to prepare the tentative list, how to reflect to the global strategy to it, and when can we start the discussion is in advisory bodies and state parties. And we'd like to thank very much to the Secretariat and advisory bodies for the pilot projects. After the reports of the pilot projects, we'd like to go back to think about deeply, how can we improve the process from the old process, nomination files, tentatively, how to prepare the tentative list, how to reflect the global strategies, and to prepare the nomination files, and also the periodic reportings. So that is, but at this moment, simply thanks to the Secretariat for the pilot project, the progress. Thank you very much.
I give the floor again to India.
Thank you, Chair. First, a statement, just a small statement. I believe the ICOMOS gap analysis has not been updated since 2004. Clearly, that's an area I'd like to be corrected, but that's my impression. Secondly, I come back to the balanced and representative. And after years of working on this, after years of talking on this, half of all inscriptions, at least before this meeting, even today are from Europe and North America, about a fifth from the Asia-Pacific region, about a sixth from Africa and the Arab region put together, and only an eighth from GRULAC. Clearly there is a problem. It is not changing, it's probably getting worse. Somewhere it also has to deal with concepts. We have to realize that World Heritage, and we have outstanding examples discussed over the last few days, has to go beyond the jetties and villas and gardens and decorated farmhouses. I mean, we need to look at this differently. ICOMOS, if you're not able to handle this, I mean, do we need to look at the great centers of learning and heritage across the world, in the Arab world, in Singapore, in Japan, and elsewhere? Local chapters, of course, we should involve them. And I think ICOMOS is making efforts, but in India, a country of 1,300 million people, till recently, ICOMOS India consisted of 6 people, all retired and most tired. So we need to look at this, and you need to look very seriously at the possibility of alternative sources of advice which is provided for. But if ICOMOS is to do it, either ICOMOS has to undergo a transformation that we have not seen yet, develop an outreach that we have not seen yet. This is a very serious issue. And I think this is where it comes down. We also need to look at a greater role for UNESCO field offices, meaning if they are not trained, the World Heritage Center could look at this, could train them, but they are a less expensive source. You don't need to fly people from all over, and I think the World Heritage Center is capable of doing it. In many cases, it has done it. Thank you, Chair.
On Mexico, please.
Muchas gracias nuevamente, señor presidente. Nada más brevemente queremos mencionar dos temas de fortalecimiento que creo que son importantes. Como lo han mencionado los distinguidos delegados de los Emiratos Árabes, de Malí y ahorita de la India, el tema del fortalecimiento de capacidades técnicas es importante. Nosotros lo hemos estado mencionando también a lo largo de otras sesiones del comité, de aprovechar a los técnicos que ya han sido capacitados y seguir promoviendo la capacitación de nuevos técnicos expertos en ellos, pero que los organismos asesores también los tomen en cuenta. De nada servirá que se esté formando a gente para que trabajen meramente en sus sitios y no haya una colaboración más puntual con los organismos asesores. Y algo que para nosotros es muy importante, permanentemente sale el tema a discusión en nuestro país, el fortalecimiento del comportamiento ético de los comités nacionales. Pues además de tener contradicciones muy fuertes entre los comités nacionales y los estados parte, también son muy frecuentes las contradicciones entre esos comités nacionales y las opiniones de ICOMOS Internacional, por ejemplo. Muchas gracias.
Donne la parole à la Sénégal, please.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Bon, je n'aurais pas souhaité parler à nouveau, mais il y a un certain nombre de questions qui me paraissent importantes. Je pense que les organisations consultatives ont un rôle extrêmement important qui est souligné, mais il faudrait peut-être qu'on fasse attention à ce qu'il n'y ait pas de confusion du juge-arbitre dans le processus en amont. Je pense qu'il faut beaucoup d'indépendance et de distanciation par rapport à cela pour que les organisations consultatives ne considèrent pas certains dossiers comme étant les leurs. Revenant sur les listes indicatives, je pense que là aussi, la question, il ne faut pas trop accabler les organisations, c'est des questions locales. C'est des questions presque nationales, je dirais. Et je pense que les États doivent être en mesure de préparer des listes indicatives crédibles. Cela repose sur plusieurs critères, dont des inventaires. La plupart de nos pays, quand je prends l'Afrique, n'ont pas des inventaires complets. On ne connaît même pas la nature et la valeur des patrimoines que nous avons. Et ça, c'est un travail, c'est un exercice interne qu'on doit faire. Cela doit, à mon avis, reposer non pas sur ce qu'on appelle assez familièrement renforcement des capacités, mais sur une véritable capacitation. On ne peut pas renforcer des capacités là où elles n'existent pas. C'est-à-dire, on ne peut pas prendre une personne, l'amener dans un centre, elle fait un stage pendant 3 mois, on dit que vous êtes devenu un spécialiste du patrimoine. Non, vous n'êtes devenu spécialiste de rien du tout. Je pense qu'il est important dans nos systèmes, notamment au niveau des universités, de faire de telle sorte que de véritables curricula consacrés aux questions de patrimoine puissent se développer. C'est d'ailleurs déjà en cours dans de nombreuses institutions universitaires. À mon avis, c'est cela qu'il faut renforcer. Les organismes subsidiaires qu'on crée sur la base de projets à gauche et à droite peuvent être intéressants, mais ils ne peuvent pas résoudre les questions structurelles. Si on veut que la baisse drastique constatée au niveau de la représentation baisse, il faudrait faire de telle sorte qu'au niveau structurel, qu'on règle les questions, notamment au niveau des universités, des centres de recherche, qui font fournir des cadres sur une très longue durée et faire de telle sorte que des études complètes puissent être consacrées à chaque bien. Cela me paraît important, ce n'est pas une question simple. On ne peut pas résoudre ça d'un coup de baguette magique. Les organisations consultatives font ce qu'elles peuvent, mais je pense qu'elles devraient aider un peu plus à la capacitation en intervenant dans les curricula universitaires pour faire de telle sorte qu'on crée des masses critiques de personnes capables de prendre en charge les questions de patrimoine, qu'ils soient naturels ou culturels. Sinon, on va pousser, mais on aura des difficultés toujours à la fin. Merci.
Thank you. I give the floor to Qatar, please.
شكرا سيد الرئيس. على كل حال لا يختلف أحد هنا في القاعة على أهمية الجهات الاستشارية للجنة التراث العالمي، ولكن كما ذكر سفير الهند هناك بعض الأمور التي ربما بحاجة إلى دراسة وإعادة نظر. مثلا يعني العدد أو تقريبا عدم وجود خبراء في بعض الجهات الاستشارية من مثلا الدول العربية، وهذه مشكلة. وهنا سؤال يطرح: هل يمكن يعني لأن يكون عدد المواقع المسجلة على لائحة التراث العالمي من الدول العربية بهذا الحجم القليل، بينما هذه منطقة كانت مهدا للحضارات؟ فقط على سبيل المثال نذكر العراق التي كانت يعني ولا زالت يعني بها العديد والعديد من المواقع التي يمكن أن تسجل وبكل جدارة على لائحة التراث. هناك أيضا مشكلة في طريقة دراسة المواقع الأثرية، وهنا نرجع أيضا لعدم وجود خبراء من المناطق المعنية. فعندما نرسل خبير من منطقة ما من قارة ما إلى قارة أخرى ربما ليس لديه نفس الحس لكي يتفاعل أو يصل لتحليل يناسب الموقع الذي هو بصدد دراسته. فكما ذكرنا عمل الجهات الاستشارية مهم، ولكن هناك حاجة للمزيد من العمل لتطوير القدرات ولنصل إلى نتائج يعني تكون مرضية بقدر ما، حتى لا ندخل في نقاشات كما مثلا حصل بالأمس. تكون نقاشاتنا مصبة أكثر في يعني قائمة على تقارير نحن مقتنعون بأنها عملت بشكل جيد. شكرا سيد الرئيس.
Donne la parole à Mali, please.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Je crois qu'on a dit beaucoup de choses. La représentativité, l'équilibre, on parle de quantité, de qualité. Mais il y a un problème dont on ne parle pas suffisamment, surtout en ce qui concerne le pays en développement. C'est la notion même de patrimoine mondial. Quelle perception? Il faut travailler énormément sur ce point-là, parce que même les décideurs ne comprennent pas ce que c'est. Ce n'est pas un problème de capacitation seulement. Il y a un problème de renforcement des capacités. Nos services, nos institutions, les directions chargées du patrimoine, pas seulement culturel, naturel. C'est pas rare de voir un agent des eaux et forêts, un ingénieur des eaux et forêts, qui, quand vous lui parlez des valeurs universelles exceptionnelles, il ne comprend rien du tout. Et je pense que l'ICROM peut, dans ce sens-là, avec les institutions de nos États, travailler sur le renforcement des capacités des gestionnaires. C'est extrêmement important. Nous sommes confrontés à ce problème parce que nos États même perçoivent très mal ce que c'est. Notre ministre a quitté l'autre jour. Il était étonné, impressionné par tout ce qui s'est fait ici, autour du patrimoine, parce qu'au sein de nos gouvernements, c'est une notion qui peut-être relayée au second plan. On dit que c'est l'affaire de l'UNESCO. Donc je pense qu'il y a un travail au niveau des États au niveau des régions, des États, ce n'est pas seulement les organisations consultatives. Elles font beaucoup de choses. Elles font beaucoup de choses dans la limite des moyens, de ce qu'elles peuvent faire, mais je crois qu'on doit travailler à l'information, la sensibilisation au niveau des décideurs dans certains pays. Merci.
Algérie, vous avez la parole.
C'est un débat essentiel dans la Convention. La question de la transparence doit être organisée. Ce ne sont pas les organisations consultatives, de notre point de vue, qui sont en cause. La Convention nous demande et dicte qu'il y a deux organisations consultatives, l'UCN et l'ICOMOS. Et donc c'est sur la base de la Convention qu'on fait appel à ces organes et qu'on soumet tous les dossiers à ces organes consultatifs. Mais l'ICOMOS et l'UCN, qui sont des ONG bien sûr, sont organisés d'une certaine manière, librement bien entendu, et qui nécessitent la mise en place dans chaque pays de comités nationaux. De comités nationaux qui seraient le réservoir d'experts du pays ou de la région pour connaître des dossiers qui sont soumis à l'ICOMOS. Or, et nous le savons tous, beaucoup de pays n'ont pas de comités nationaux où ces experts où il pourrait y avoir une liste d'experts auxquels les bureaux régionaux pourraient faire appel. Mais ceci est l'organisation de l'ICOMOS. Nous ne pouvons pas nous interférer dans ces questions. Mais il y a une réalité. Il s'agirait probablement, peut-être à mon avis, qu'il y ait un débat avec les organisations consultatives qui trouveraient des solutions dans leur statut pour faire appel à des experts régionaux qui ne sont pas encadrés dans des comités nationaux qui relèvent de législations particulières. Nous aurions ainsi une liste d'experts à l'échelle régionale qui pourrait donner un avis, notamment sur les prismes de vue que nous pouvons avoir dans certaines régions sur des sites qui forcément ne relève pas des compétences peut-être d'un expert qui est spécialisé dans des domaines précis et qui ne peut pas être un spécialiste de toutes les... un spécialiste, comment dirais-je, pluridisciplinaire. Il ne peut être spécialiste que d'une question. Donc, c'est sûr, c'est par la suite ce que vient de dire le délégué du Mexique est aussi vrai. Il peut y avoir des divergences entre le comité national et l'ICOMOS et la direction de l'ICOMOS, et ça c'est une autre question. Mais le réservoir d'experts au niveau des différents États et des régions est une nécessité absolue. Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Je donne la parole à la Suisse.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président. Je ne résiste pas à la tentation, à la suite de ce qui a été dit et que nous approuvons largement, et en particulier à la suite de ce qui a été dit par le délégué du Mali, de renvoyer l'attention au programme du patrimoine mondial pour le renforcement des capacités adopté lors de la dernière session du comité, pour lequel nous nous sommes engagés, nous, la Suisse, que nous avons cherché à présenter dans un side event, comme nous les appelons, et qui permettrait justement de mieux focaliser non seulement l'attention, mais également des ressources sur la promotion de l'expertise, ceci à travers le monde, à l'appui du patrimoine de chacun et du patrimoine mondial. Je vous remercie.
Now I turn to ICOMOS and ICROM. ICOMOS first. ICOMOS first, and after that, ICROM.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to comment on various specific points that have been raised by state parties, and then perhaps also I could make a few general points on behalf of ICOMOS. First of all, on the specific points, there were comments made on two of the pilot projects. One was the Maldives, and the second one was Fray Bentos. On the Maldives, I can say that ICOMOS, like the State Party, was very concerned at the lack of dialogue. And I think this has been the result of a sort of bit of a misunderstanding about what the upstream processes were all about within the State Party. And they thought they were following quite well the recommendations of the International Assistance Panel, but we have now opened up a dialogue with the State Party and explained precisely how we can help. And indeed, things are now moving forward in a very positive way, and there will be an advisory mission to help them move forward to the next stage of the process. But I think this does highlight a lack of understanding more generally about how the pilot projects work, and indeed how this emerging upstream process can work with the engagement between the advisory bodies and the state parties. So we're all learning as these things move forward. In relation to Fray Bentos, I can confirm that, yes, an ICOMOS expert has visited the property, but there is to be a visit of a further expert before the report will be finalized and made available. The third point that was, factual point that was made was in relation to the ICOMOS gap analysis, which the Honourable Delegate of India raised. Indeed, the ICOMOS gap analysis was undertaken in 2004 and presented to the committee, but at the same time there was also a gap analysis that was undertaken by IUCN the same year. Neither of them have been updated, and this is something that has been highlighted on a number of occasions about the need to update this process, and we were rather hoping that there might be funds available to update it for 2014. That's sort of 10 years on from when it was first done. So I think both of the advisory bodies really fully support the idea of updating these gap analyses. But I'm afraid the issue is one of resources as to how we might be able to achieve that. But could I now make some more general points in relation to what has been raised? ICOMOS is structured, as has been said, very differently from IUCN. We have less visibility on the ground in terms of regional offices. Nevertheless, we do have a wide network of experts, some 10,000 members, and national committees. And we are absolutely dedicated to using the resources in this emerging field of upstream stream work. We, in the best way possible, and building engagements with state parties. But we, as several members of the committee have suggested, there is a need for a strategy for this upstream work because it has so many dimensions. And to us, it has two particular dimensions. One is specific advice, which state parties call upon the advisory bodies to give advice on particular sites that they've already identified as possibilities for inscription, and also perhaps on particular aspects of the tentative list. But as I think has become clear from this debate, there is also a strong need for generic advice, which is much more long-term, for training, capacity building, and awareness raising, all of which have been raised during this discussion. And ICOMOS considers that it is fundamental that there is more discussion on how the advisory bodies can engage in both specific advice and generic advice, and particularly for the latter, in collaboration with the wider heritage community, because this is essential. The advisory bodies together have limited capacity, and we absolutely must engage in the best way possible and act as levers, if you like, to engage with the wider heritage community to begin to address the very strong emerging needs of state parties. But I would also like to just comment on the tentative list issue, because some state parties have suggested it would be beneficial for advisory bodies to be involved in tentative lists, whereas an opposite view was put forward from the Honourable Delegate of Senegal. At the time that the GAPS reports were written in 2004, it was stated then that tentative lists were absolutely crucial starting point for the nomination process, because these GAP reports analysed not only inscribed sites, but also tentative list sites. And the conclusion of the GAP report was that if all the sites on the tentative list were inscribed, then there would be very little impact on the overall representativeness of the World Heritage List. So there were fundamental issues that were identified at that time in relation to tentative lists and the issue of trying to make the World Heritage List more representative. And ICOMOS certainly does take the view that the tentative list is the key starting point, and there is the potential we consider for perhaps not commenting on individual sites within the tentative list, but certainly offering, as the Honourable Delegate from Germany suggested, some sort of generic advice on scoping and how tentative lists might be developed, and the sort of opportunities for certain types of site which would help to make the list more representative being included in tentative lists. So we do see this in general as an extremely important point, and we hope that this can be addressed as we move more in depth to look at the way that the upstream process can be structured in the future. Thank you.
You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. First, I would like to give just a small, gentle reminder to the distinguished representative of Algeria that, in fact, there are 3 statutory advisory bodies to the World Heritage Convention, not just 2. And it is exactly within the context of the upstream processes that we feel that ECROM can be of the most help. While most of you are member states of ECROM, and it might be possible to utilize our additional capacity within a more comprehensive upstream process. I would like to first recognize the comments of many of the states parties which see the upstream process in its wider context. ECROM sees the upstream process as part of a larger capacity building process, and while we cannot engage in direct dialogue in relation to individual nominations, as IUCN and ECOMOS can, we do feel that effective upstream processes must begin with well thought out capacity building activities. This is why the advisory bodies, specifically in relation to nominations, have cited often the excellent work of the Africa World Heritage Fund. The model of upstream process that they have developed includes a series of regional workshops along with field mentoring to aid in the development of nominations. These are attended by the advisory bodies, but they're also attended by other states parties who are doing the same work on nominations at the same time. And discussions and comments that, that take place are not just given by the advisory bodies, but also by other participants of the workshops who are going through the same process and facing the same problems. The advice received by individual states parties from the workshop are much richer than just a single bilateral discussion. Rather, they come from all of the different people who are working together within this workshop format. Now, clearly, this doesn't replace direct dialogue with IUCN and ECOMOS, but it can be a strong complement to it. And further, this type of process doesn't just build capacity for a single nomination, but it builds capacity within states parties for all future nominations that that state party may wish to be working on in the future. This kind of process for nominations is extremely valuable, and I think that all regions should pick up on the model and adapt it specifically to their own needs and their own specific situations, using the advisory bodies, using the Category 2 centers, as mentioned by the distinguished delegate from Senegal, using universities where possible, and other institutions. At the larger scale, as I mentioned in the item on capacity building, we within the advisory bodies are also working to improve our own capacity and our own representativity within the regions of the world. And toward that end, we have carried out a series of workshops in all regions to build our representativity in the different regions. And as mentioned by Switzerland, we have a great number of other activities that we would like to implement within the World Heritage Capacity Building Program in the future. And we would really ask the support of all states parties in order to undertake this important capacity building need at all levels of the convention. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for giving me the floor.
Merci. IUCN, you have 1 or 2 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. I was told 1, so I'll try to be brief. Firstly, I think, in fact, I'd like to endorse the intervention that Ikram just made, which covered some of the points I wanted to emphasize about successful models with the African World Heritage Fund, and that this should be part of a capacity building process. And I think, given the time, I would like to just remind that we do have new gap studies launched here on Criterion 7 and also Criterion 9 and 10 with the support of Australia and Germany, but we've noted in the discussion that there's still more work to come back to on the geological criteria. But primarily, I think I would like to really endorse the number of recommendations that said beyond these specific pilot studies, it's time to re-engage in the broader reflection about where this leaves us and how we can move forward into a larger process to mainstream the culture of the upstream process into our work. It is partly a cultural question about the type of interaction between the large networks that we access and the sort of comments that I think Mexico, Algeria and others made about connecting to the networks of expertise in countries, whether those are in state or in wider networks of professional practice. And my last comment is we need to do this in a way which engages with the question of equity, because we do need to make sure that in offering upstream processes that we don't create a system that has more access for those states parties with means than those state parties that have less means. So we need to make sure that this does engage in the need to produce a balanced and representative World Heritage List. Thank you, Chair.
Merci. I see no more comment. So the draft decision 37-9 is adopted. India, please.
I'm sorry, Chair. This cannot be a routine adoption. There was far too much that was said from the floor, some amount said from the rostrum. May I suggest that the World Heritage Center actually work on this during the lunch period? We take note of all kinds of things. We don't take note of the notable. And I think what has been said here is notable. I would suggest that the World Heritage Center look at this, try and reflect some of the issues that have been raised, and then put it in the resolution. Thank you, Chair.
I think if we can make things a little bit more simple and clearer, I suggest that the committee member who took the floor can sum up the idea. You see, that means request for amendment sent to the, I think, rapporteur, that they can work quicker and more efficiently.
Thank you, Chair. There was a message from the floor, and I presume the World Heritage Center got it. It's an important message, and it would not be, let me say, a good thing not to hear that message. This could go into your oral report, and this could be placed there, but the message is much too important. The decisions, there are a plethora of decisions. At St. Petersburg, there were 300 of them. But I think this is very important. Maybe the World Heritage Center can give you something which could form a part of the Chairman's report. Thank you, Chair.
There is only a different idea on how to work. Now I fully agree that the report should reflect, you see, the different idea, different view expressed, I think, in our session. But how to reflect this So one idea is to receive the succession, written succession, and another one is the center have to sum up everything, you see, and write down. So now I like to ask the committee, who is willing to send, I think who is in favor of sending the written succession from different speakers. So, and another option is the center has to arrive by itself, you see, to reflect every idea. But I think it is clearer that if I think the speaker himself, you see, can write down very short idea that he wants to be reflected in the report. Yes. So if we objection to this idea or no exception, if no exception to the idea, Mali, please. La Mali, please.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Je crois que la suggestion faite par l'Inde que le centre fasse une synthèse me paraît raisonnable parce qu'il faut qu'on évite ce qui est arrivé hier. C'est-à-dire que les gens envoient le truc, après on va discuter. Non, ça, moi, je ne suis pas d'accord avec ça. Que le centre fasse une synthèse. S'il y a quelque chose d'important qui manque, on peut le suggérer. Sinon, on va passer encore 1 heure de temps à discuter de ce qui a été envoyé. Merci.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If I understand well the proposals that have been made, there is no doubt that we will reflect all this discussion that has taken place in the summary record of the discussion. So the report of the session will contain each and every intervention and suggestion that has been made. Now, if it is a question of amending the draft decision that is before your consideration, we can include a general paragraph that the center and the advisory bodies should take note of all the suggestions that were made in the discussion on this item and reflect them in the progress report for next year or reflect them in the development of other options and proposals for the next session. If that is acceptable to the committee members, we could proceed in that manner, Mr. President, and the adoption of the decision would have to be done maybe after lunch. Thank you, Mr. President.
Is it acceptable to the committee? Okay. So we adopt the document. So after lunch, we will have the additional text.
Announcements.
Please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. The organizational committee would like to invite the heads of the delegations of the committee members, advisory bodies, representatives of the secretariat and legal advisor to proceed to the lobby on the first floor for a photo session just now. Then we have 3 other announcements. First of all, there is the Human Evolution meeting, which takes place from 1 o'clock to 2:30 in the Champay room. Then there is, this will be followed by the World Heritage Youth Forum in the same room after this Human Evolution presentation. Which then starts at 2 o'clock, and then there is another event which is the Disaster Risk Management and World Heritage on the 4th floor, room 4 in the advisory body space starting at 1 o'clock. Thank you.
The session is adjourned.